think self-care is really important. And, I love being a coach, and I could probably coach many more hours than I do. One, because there's limited number of people, who could benefit from the support of a coach in one form or another. But if I don't get enough rest, if I don't meditate, if I don't exercise, if I don't eat well, if I don't cultivate and maintain the relationships that are important to me outside of my work, then it has an impact on my work. So I have to consciously prioritize ensuring that I take care of myself. Kind of put your oxygen on mask on first before you put on the mask for your client, so that you can show up for that client and for yourself, in the healthiest mentally and physical ways possible.
Welcome to Career Coaching Secrets, the podcast where we talk with successful career coaches on how they built their success and the hard lessons they learned along the way. My name is Davis Nguyen, and I'm the founder of Purple Circle, where we help career coaches scale their business to 7 and 8 figures without burning out. Before Purple Circle, I started and scaled several 7 and 8 figure career coaching businesses myself and consulted with 2 career coaching businesses that are now doing over $100 million each. Whether you're an established coach or just building your practice for the first time, you'll discover the secrets to elevating your coaching business.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Career Coaching Secrets podcast. I'm your host, Rajan, and today's guest is Colleen Boselli. She is a seasoned executive coach, corporate trainer, and principal at Strength Catalyst Partners. With over 25 years of leadership and consulting experience across global corporations, she specializes in empowering professionals to lead with confidence, leverage their strengths, and navigate complex challenges. Known for her authenticity and strategic insight, Colleen has coached leaders across the US, Europe, and Asia with a focus on senior management. Her clients range from top tech firms to financial institutions, consistently praising her ability to unlock potential and drive transformative results. And it's my pleasure to have her on the podcast today. Welcome to the show, Colleen.
Thank you, Regin. It's nice to be here. I appreciate the opportunity to lend my expertise to help other coaches.
Like I mentioned before, before we started this, I always enjoy having guests that have been doing this for so many years. So it's an honor for me. Colleen, tell me a little bit more about what inspired you to become an executive coach and start your own coaching business.
I think I've had coaching in me for as long as I can remember. I have always been really interested in trying to figure out how to enable people to feel confident in themselves. And even as a kid, probably when I was around 12 years old, I used to go to the library, the little public library in my town, and check out self-help books. So I've been thinking about this for a long time. And as I was contemplating, our conversation today, was thinking about, what was I doing in my early 20s? And one very wonderful memory I have is I delivered the commencement address when I graduated from Boston College. And lo and behold, my topic, I could choose anything, within reason that makes sense for that environment, was confidence. And then, I've always kind of kept up with my reading about self-development. And when the whole positive psychology movement started back in the late 90s and early 2000s, I did a lot of reading about positive psychology, and I found myself very attracted to the strengths-based work that at the time was being talked about by Gallup and Marcus Buckingham and Donald Clifton. And that motivated me to be thinking more and more about, what tools could I use, or what research is out there, or what approach could I take if I would decide perhaps to try put the coaching hat on. And at the time I was working in the corporate world. I started my career in the advertising industry, and I enjoyed working in that creative environment. But after my 4th child was born, I decided to cut that corporate cord and kind of take all this studying and thinking about self-development and try to put that, into my own business. So that's, what led me to start my coaching business about 24 years ago.
24 years, that's quite an experience. How does the journey look like from the moment you started the coaching business to where you are at today? Even the world has changed a lot since then. So
Yes, yeah. Well, back when I started out as a coach, coaching itself as a profession was new. And it was actually a psychologist that I had hired to help me with a project in my corporate role that introduced me to the idea of coaching. But because it was a new, uncharted territory, I think it was up to me to figure out, well, how am I going to make this work for myself? And I sort of love studying situations, corporate environments or marketplace issues, and trying to figure out what would be a creative solution to that. So when I decided to kind of figure this out, I approached a trade association that was creating programming for its members to develop their leadership skills. And I pitched the idea of hiring me to come in, and I said, I can create a coaching program, and the participants that you might market this to, maybe middle managers, in companies in New England where I live in the US, could come and they could learn how to develop their leadership skills. And in between each of their leadership training sessions, I could offer coaching sessions. So I put together a package that seemed to me to be something that would be really valuable for this association to offer to its membership across companies in New England, but also give me the opportunity to offer the kind of services that I felt were appropriate for me launching my coaching business, and certainly building on all the work that I'd done in the corporate work over the years. So that's how I got started. And that worked very well. I mean, I was really lucky, and I often recommend it to young coaches to try and think creatively about what could you make up that the marketplace might need that would give you a chance to sort of dip your toe in the water and see how it works. And luckily for me, that worked. A lot of corporations sent their employees, and then word of mouth enabled it to continue growing over the years. And then my husband actually got a job transfer to London. And so we moved out of the United States. And once I got the family all settled, I was really interested again to figure out, well, how can I relaunch my career in a new place? I knew that it would be really important for me to have credentials that were recognized in the UK and across Europe. So I did get my coaching credentials in the UK. And I leveraged that for probably my most important sort of foray into executive coaching, because as with most, if not all, executive coaching or even life coaching programs, you have to have coaching practice clients. And I'd already been a coach for a while, but I needed, practice clients for this UK-based program. So I decided, well, I'm going to approach the companies with whom I'd like to work, once I have myself well established. And one of those was Google. And so I believe in divine intervention. I think I was there the right day. I had a meeting with an HR person. I said, I need to have practice clients. I'm willing to do this for free. I'm not brand new to the coaching field. And divine intervention, I think, played a part of it, because someone had come into his office that day and said, I don't have a budget, but I need a coach. And so he said, we'll give you a whirl on this. And that was probably 14 years ago. And so that organization became my cornerstone client for more than a decade after that. So I guess for me, for any new coaches that are listening to this podcast, the little lessons in there are one, be creative, and two, really have your sights set, on what you might want to do, and see if you can find creative ways to get in. Or many people will say that it's not a good idea to offer your services for free. I had the opposite experience, not only at that early start of my career, but really over the years when I've been interested in trying something different or getting into a new industry. I'd like to sort of plant seeds here and there and offer a free coaching session or some kind of introductory call or whatever it might be to help the person learn a little bit more of what the services could be that I would offer. Yeah, so that's kind of how I got started.
And how do you see coaching or executive coaching today? Even your experience working with clients today, is it the same type of clients, like as big as Google, or what does it look like right now?
I think in the early years, coaching was offered in one of two scenarios, either to people who had some significant development issues. Occasionally that was, and they wanted to keep the person. So bring a coach in to see if they can help the person, overcome whatever the obstacles might be to their success. Or two, it was offered only to most senior management or the highest potential individuals. Now, with the familiarity that people across organizations and up and down within organizations have with coaching as a profession. And now with it being seen as something that is a perk, if not a important part of career development, it's offered, in my observation, much more widely across organizations, and people are asking for it. Of course, at the same time, we have a tremendous rise in the number of coaches that are available for competition for me, but for organizations to hire, to fit their needs. And then, there's been so much research, fortunately, done over the last 20 plus years to prove the effectiveness of coaching or to provide all kinds of assessments and tools that coaches and their clients can avail themselves of to enhance the coaching experience. So those are probably the biggest things that I have noticed. Well, and I actually maybe I'd add one more thing, and that is the emergence of AI. I've been really enjoying experimenting with my clients on the use of AI in our coaching conversations as, hopefully a tool that they could find valuable in addressing whatever the coaching obstacle or challenge or opportunity might be.
Have you ever used ChatGPT or something like that to coach yourself?
I don't think I would have labeled it as coaching myself, but I do find myself using ChatGPT and a couple of the other platforms daily. And I guess if I took a step back and thought about it, half the time, maybe the questions that I'm asking it to help me with could be posed into coaching questions. Yeah, because I'm looking for a perspective. I'm looking for a perspective on something, or pros and cons of something, or a timetable to help me figure out how to execute whatever it might be. And that's why I've been using it in coaching conversations, because sometimes even live, right in the coaching conversation, the client and I will come up with the idea, I wonder what ChatGPT would say. You want to give it a whirl right there in the conversation. And it's been so valuable, I think, to the other person to see that they can use it. Not that I want to take business away, from, which I don't think it would, from personal coaching, but as an enhancement to the success of the conversation, I think it's phenomenal.
Yeah, it is definitely a shortcut to having to do a lot of research manually. Obviously, it doesn't replace the human, but it's a very good assistant so far. And the reason why I asked you if you used it to be like a coach for you is this was an idea that I've been presented once in the podcast, where a coach has also trained it to be a coach for him in different areas. It doesn't have to be like executive, but it could be like mindset, could be anything. Like you could actually train the AI to be a coach for you and talk in the way that you would want to talk, or like, yeah. The other way to look at it was like train AI to be a coach just like yourself. So you give it thoughts that you would think, and like you train it with prompts and to maybe make a double of yourself sometimes, and you could offer that as an extra, so that oftentimes when you don't want to always be on a call for small questions, you have trained this AI, given it a lot of your information from your experience. It could also answer some of the questions for you, take some of the lifting for you, maybe just small questions, and leave the bigger ones for the Zoom calls. So yeah, it's always interesting.
I love that creative thinking, Rection. I really do. I was at the Institute of Coaching conference last fall, and one of the speakers was Dr. Martin Seligman, father of positive psychology. And he introduced to the audience his own AI powered coaching tool called Ask Martin. So he had uploaded his books and all the science work he had done, and demonstrated the use of his Ask Martin tool as a AI coach. And it was phenomenal, very impressive. It felt exciting to be in a community of people who were excited about adopting what could be seen, as a competitor to our own services.
Yeah, obviously you have to adopt and embrace AI and try to incorporate it into your coaching business. But so far, I don't think we have any risks of it replacing the human experience. I wanted to ask you, so we talked about in your intro that you're helping like professionals, executives. Is there a specific industry that you're working with or a specific demographic? Obviously, you work with people in US, Europe, and Asia, so maybe demographic isn't limited, but is there an industry?
No, not really. Since I've been coaching for 23 plus years, depending on how you cut it, I have worked across every industry at, all different levels. And I just suggested geographically dispersed. And that's one of the reasons that I was attracted to the coaching business, I think, is because I really enjoy uh, learning about and using my skills to help people, across industries. I mean, to me, one of the hopefully the hallmarks of a good coach, and I hopefully I think of myself as a good coach, is the ability to be able to work with anyone at any level in any country, assuming there's not a language barrier in any industry, because I'm just showing up with my brain, as an asset to that individual and the questions I ask and the support that they feel they get from me to help them solve whatever. And so the industry doesn't really matter.
Do you have any goals or things that are coming up with your coaching business right now in the next 1 to 3 years?
Yes. Well, I've talked quite a bit about the fact that I have had a lot of corporate work over the years, but in the last 10 years or so, I started introducing more and more nonprofits into my client mix. And in the last 2 or 3 years, I have stepped away from quite a few of my corporate engagements and have shifted my client focus to being nonprofit. So I'm now working primarily with executive directors and founders of small community-based as well as U.S. and our international-based nonprofits, offering the same leadership and management skills, sort of executive coaching, but to a population of individuals or organizations that haven't traditionally had access to coaching because of the financial barriers and or the familiarity with this as a tool to help them grow. And then secondly, I have been organizing the last couple years community-based groups for women who are looking to empower what I call their midlife. So I created a program that invite women to come to learn about their strengths and how they can move through stages of their life in a way that is empowering and confidence boosting because of the way that they are consciously and intentionally leveraging their strengths. And then the last thing I would say, just thinking about, what I'm doing now is because I really have an interest in helping other coaches and helping people leverage their strengths effectively, I've been thinking and working on trying to do a couple new things. So I actually am launching my own podcast series called The Strength Catalyst, where I'm going to be interviewing people, guests, nonprofit leaders, and helping them understand what their strengths are and how they can leverage them in success of their role and for their nonprofit. And I've also started a little business with my daughter where we have created affirmation cards, again, strengths based, with a hope that people will use them at their desk, in their shower, wherever they do some of their best thinking, to be, again, really intentional and thoughtful on, are they leveraging their strengths as wisely as they can be. So anyway, I'm dabbling in a bunch of different things there. It's kind of a long answer to your question.
Interesting you mentioned affirmation cards. I've interviewed a coach that was doing something similar as well. It just so happens to be that her husband is also Italian. But I'll share that podcast with you after this call and maybe just get some ideas. It's a little bit different, but she had some cards like that where it just triggers thoughts to people. And yeah, it's very interesting. I'm going to share that with you. And when it comes to the podcast, are you thinking of like period of time, or have you already started the preparations on the podcast?
Well, good question. I'm using my friend ChatGPT. So funny you brought that up earlier. And I've been working on, the guest profile and my trailer and my intake forms and the structure. I'll meet with the editor next week, and I hope to start in a couple of weeks. And I'm planning on starting with eight podcast series, and again, focusing on nonprofit directors that I've been talking with. And, hopefully not only will be helpful to the people who have the kind of live, authentic opportunity to learn about their strengths in our conversation, but also I hope to the people who listen to the podcast, whether those are coaches that decide they too want to become a strength strategist, or, to anybody who's listening to the podcast and discovers the appeal perhaps of deepening their self-awareness and using their strengths knowledge to help them build their confidence. Because kind of all for me, it always goes back to the confidence piece that I mentioned at the beginning, and my desire to really help people know their tools as well as they can, so that when I'm out of the picture, whether that's 2 weeks, 3 months, 3 years, whatever, into our relationship, that they can self-coach effectively because they know what their strengths are and they know how to use them wisely. And that's, again, where a podcast comes in to remind them of that, or the affirmations cards come in as a tool to remind you of that.
And you also mentioned organizing a community-based group for women midlife. I wanted to ask, are you utilizing other communities, or are you building your own community?
I'm building my own community right now, but I have done this before. When we moved to London, I mentioned earlier in our conversation, I didn't know anyone there, and I wanted to establish my community from a personal standpoint, but also begin to make some connections so I could, imagine how I could rebuild my coaching business in that country. And so that time I called the program Bloom Where You're Planted, because I was in an expat community where many people had given up their jobs to come there, or in a job search mode, or were passing through the UK on their way to someplace else, and often longing for not only a community but a feeling that they were doing something really worthwhile. So in that situation, I started it by doing it at my own dining room table, but then the school asked for me to kind of attach the program to the orientation of the program they did for all the families that were moving in and out. So yeah, I mean, I can associate with other organizations, but it's also very fulfilling for me, honestly, through word of mouth, just sort of let the program grow as it does, as people talk about it and tell their friends that they've found value from it.
I
Yeah.
really like I really like all of these ideas. All of them seem connected to each other. So even like when you shift the focus to nonprofit, and then the podcast is also related to the nonprofit directors, and then the communities and the affirmation cards, all of them seem to be aligned together. I wanted to ask you, when it comes to like throughout your years of experience, has there been any investment that has actually made a very good impact in you further growing your coaching business? So any like coaching programs, masterminds, communities, investment really that you feel like has been valuable in you growing your coaching business? Is there something you'd like to share there?
I'd say several things. One is I have a mastermind group of 5 other coaches. We're about the same level of seniority in the coaching business. And we've been meeting monthly for almost 10 years, monthly on a Zoom call. And then usually once a year, we get together for our 3 or 4 day retreat at one of our homes, or, some chosen place. That group has been phenomenal for holding each other accountable, for teaching each other things that we're learning, in our own journeys, for collaborating, for getting advice on how to price something, etc. So that's one thing that I highly recommend to other coaches, is to create your own mastermind or soul sister group, or whatever you might want to call it. I also have in my community a group, we call ourselves the Law of Attraction group, and it's a group of people that I meet with every other week, and we start first of the year and go through the whole calendar year. Start as kind of a New Year's resolution thing, and again, it's an accountability opportunity, an opportunity to get ideas. So that has also kept me focused and kept me driven to come back to our meetings and say, all right, I did this, I worked on the podcast, or I wrote the thing, or, what have you. That's been really excellent. And I love supporting other people, in those groups. And then I know 2 other things I would mention. One is I took a phenomenal training program, a small group thing called transformational speaking, probably a dozen years ago now. Very enlightening. And then ended up with 6 other people spending 4 days doing a really deep dive on understanding your authenticity and how to speak from your truth and from your authenticity. That was a game changer for my career, really, and my confidence. The last thing I'd think from a sort of institutional standpoint is that I'm a member of the Institute of Coaching, and I find the IOC programs, whether those are in-person events that happen on occasion, or their monthly seminars, or a variety of programs that they offer, to be instructional, motivational. And, coaching can be a lonely business, since you work by yourself. So to have opportunities to feel connected to other coaches and to hear from about their experiences, or enhance their experiences with your own, is very rewarding to me. And I imagine to a lot of other people. So I would really highly encourage people to look for those opportunities too.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. I do feel like coaching and actually every business that has moved online feels a little bit lonely. It's not that easy. I mean, there's a lot of communities. Just like you mentioned, you have your own mastermind with five other coaches, and there's also like a ton of communities online, but it does feel a little bit lonely, right? You feel lonely in this battle where you have to learn constantly. You have to face things like AI and like try to incorporate that in. So yeah, I totally get that. I wanted to ask you right now with your coaching business, what would you say is the biggest challenge that you're facing from where you are at now to where you want to be? And that could be not just financially, but like even in terms of impact, or like what is something that is, would say, the biggest bottleneck right now for you?
Well, I think on a personal, really the most personal level, probably the biggest challenge is trusting my instincts, trusting my gut, not listening to that inner critic that says, you can't do that. You don't have enough money, or that's not a good idea, or no one's going to want to listen to this. And to instead really listen to the inner mentor, the other voice in your head that says, you got this. You can do this. What the heck? What do you have to lose by giving it a try? If that person suggested it, might as well give it a try. If they did it, I can do it. Changing the narrative in my head so that I can hopefully materialize, the things that I described to you. But as I think back to my career, I tried to remember that that inner mentor was wise, and that if I listened to it, I could create opportunities for myself that might not otherwise happen if I were paying attention to the fear, that the inner critic raises in my head.
I like that. The
Yeah, I
inner
mean, I can think, yeah, I can think about other things, but nothing I think is as important as trusting yourself.
Yeah, well, I was reading a book about this actually. It's about tricking your conscious mind so that your subconscious mind reacts to it. So your conscious mind is like that one that is more logical. It could be that inner critic, could be that
Hmm.
one that's limiting you. But if you continue to give it a different narrative, change the narrative in your conscious mind, your subconscious will come up with much more creative ideas because it's ready for it. And yeah, that is something I've been trying to dig on my own as well, because most of the limits that we have are in ourselves, just like you said.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
yeah, thanks so much for sharing that. What would you say is something that when you got started, you wish you had known, that was like an unexpected lesson learned that you learned later on through experience, but if you had known that, it would have made your job much easier as a coach?
Hmm. Hmm. I think of a couple things. One is to not to hesitate to ask for help, because one can find themselves, I think, buried in a lot of administrative tasks when you are running your own business, whether that's the billing or whether that's preparing materials for workshops. And in the back of my mind, I was hesitant to do that because I kept thinking, well, it's one more person to manage, more details that would take me longer to explain to somebody else. But once I decided, all right, there is probably value, at least in experimenting with bringing on an administrative assistant or hiring a bookkeeper and getting some of that minutia managed by someone else whose strengths and desires are really in that area. And then it freed me up to do more new business and relationship cultivating, that kind of thing. So that's the first thing that comes to my mind. And then the second thing that came to my mind when you asked that question was the importance of paying attention to your pipeline. And sometimes when you're busy, you've got a fortunate situation where you have plenty of clients and much going on, maybe also in your personal life, it's a little easy to take your eye off of the new business efforts that need to be constant so that when things quiet down and the client's budget goes away or someone moves from an organization or what have you, that you've got other work waiting, or contacts that have already been well cultivated that you'll be able to turn into new business. So yeah, those are the two things that I can think of, just really thinking about what do you need to do to constantly generate your leads and what can you do to get the help that you need. Actually, I'm going to add one more thing, and that is self-care. I think self-care is really important. And, I love being a coach, and I could probably coach many more hours than I do. One, because there's limited list number of people, who could benefit from the support of a coach in one form or another. But if I don't get enough rest, if I don't meditate, if I don't exercise, if I don't eat well, if I don't cultivate and maintain the relationships that are important to me outside of my work, then that has an impact on my work. So I have to consciously prioritize ensuring that I take care of myself. Kind of put your oxygen mask on first before you put on the mask for your client so that you can show up for that client and for yourself, in the healthiest mentally and physical ways possible. That's a lesson I kind of learned the hard way a few times in my career.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. That is definitely a perspective that I can assume has not been something that other coaches have brought up. So thanks so much for that. Is there any final advice you'd like to give to other executive coaches who are trying to scale their impact?
Yes, I think the one thing we haven't talked about that has been the key to my success and genuinely the happiness that I've had in my work is developing an expertise. So I have developed my expertise in being a strength strategist. It's something that, as I mentioned before, I found intriguing and I love learning about it. And I made a conscious decision over the years to become more and more knowledgeable about how to help someone deepen their self-awareness and leverage their strengths. And so I guess the piece of advice that I would offer to other coaches is whether it's that focus or whether it's I want to be excellent at being a presentation skills coach, or I want to be excellent at being a team coach, or whatever it might be, especially given the number of coaches that are out there right now. I think the more that you can develop a niche that is consistent with your authentic self, where you genuinely can grow energetically and successfully, the better able you'll be to demonstrate authentically that passion with the clients with whom you're servicing, or prospective clients, and the more that you'll genuinely enjoy the work. I mean, when I first started out, I thought I wanted to know a little bit about everything, more of a generalist, but once I got kind of deeper into my areas of greatest interest, I think that really helped me thrive, as a coach. So that's my piece of advice.
Also makes it, from my background and marketing, makes it easier to market once you are focused and you're more authentic, because you really speak to an audience versus speaking to everybody. Like your services would apply to an audience that would feel, oh, this is exactly for me, versus, oh, this could be for everybody. Why would it be for me? So I really like that perspective. Thank you so much, Colleen. It's been lovely
You're
having you on
welcome.
the podcast. For anyone who wants to find you or connect with you, they can go into your LinkedIn, Colleen Boselli. Is there also, just looking, a website? I think there's a couple of websites, but there's, which one would you like to have people go to if they want to find you?
Strengthcatalyst.com is the primary website. Strengthcatalyst.com, yeah. Or you can email me, Colleen at Strength
Looking at the website, strengthscatalyst.com, where does the name come from?
As I've mentioned a couple times, I am a strength strategist, and the name of my company is complementary to the strengths approach that I take. And the tool that I use most commonly in my work is something called the Strengths Profile, which comes from a company in the United Kingdom. I love it, and I find it to be so useful to my clients because this simple 20-minute assessment provides the user with a report that shows them their strengths in 4 different quadrants, if you will. So one takes the strengths profile, there's 60 strengths in the assessment, they receive a report, and the report shows them of the 60, which of their strengths are realized, meaning of the 60 strengths, which ones right now am I using, am I getting energy from, and I'm able to perform well. So I look at that subset with my clients and say, all right, these are the tools that are kind of your common sense. How are you using them? And do you ever run the risk of overplaying any of those? And if you do, what does that look like? So that's a whole conversation that enables the client to look at their tools and think about how to use them relative to whatever the coaching goal might be. And then I go back to that strength assessment, and separate from these realized strengths, one receives a bucket or sort of a quadrant of their unrealized strengths. So there's a subset of the 60, if you were to take this assessment, that explain to you what are your unrealized strengths. So those that you have, you perform well, get energy from, but are not using as much. That is often very rich conversation also in the coaching engagement, where we're looking at, well, what tools do you have in your toolkit? What strengths do you hold that you're not using it? And what would it look like to be leveraging those more commonly against your goal? And then we go back to the strengths profile again, and it also shows you your draining strengths. So there's some subset of 60 where you said when you filled out the assessment, I'm good at this, but I get drained when I use that strength. And those often present really interesting aha moments for people when they think to themselves, wow, I appreciate the recognition, the pay raise, the promotion, whatever comes from me doing such and such well, but I really don't enjoy it. And that's often labeled by these strengths that you have that you're good at that drain you. And then finally, the strengths profile teases out for the person who takes it one's weaknesses. And there too, it's a really great black and white conversation. All right, you said you're not good at being creative, and that's an important part of what's needed to achieve this goal. So what are you going to do? How are we going to find that creativity elsewhere? And so what I mentioned before, I really aim to work myself out of a coaching engagement and have the person be able to self-coach. And when one knows their strengths really well, what works for them, what they might overplay, what they're not using very much of, what's draining, what's short in their toolkit, then they can be that much more effective with any goal or challenge that comes along through the year. So anyway, I highly recommend the strengths profile as a tool for coaches to look into, for sure.
Thank you so much. And we'll make sure to also link that to the description. Again, thank you so much for coming, Colleen. It's been a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Oh, thanks for inviting me. I'm really happy to share my expertise in service of other coaches and people who avail themselves of coaches. So thank you.
That's it for this episode of Career Coaching Secrets. If you enjoyed this conversation, you can subscribe to YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're listening to this episode to catch future episodes. This conversation was brought to you by Purple Circle, where we help career coaches scale their business to 7 and 8 figures without burning out. To learn more about Purple Circle, our community, and how we can help you grow your business, visit joinpurplecircle.com.